Okay, so you're probably working on your personal statement. If you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you only have a couple of days left. So at this point, you're probably just frantically editing if you haven't already submitted it. Some of you may be applying to other schools other than Oxford and have a little longer until January 15th, I believe. So let's talk about personal statements. This will be largely about editing, but also will help creating the best personal statement. Things to keep in mind. One, with 4,000 characters, you don't have much space. And it is very tempting to crowd in as much content as possible. Take advantage of the fact that at British schools, they just want to know about what is most inspiring, what shows your depth of knowledge and your interest for this particular subject. Unlike US universities, you don't have to fit everything in. You don't have to have talent leaking out of your fingertips, touching everything. They want to know about your specific course, what relates. So you can use this to your advantage by only speaking to what are the most important items in your personal statement, and you need to be smart about this. So first thing, don't restate and enumerate extra. You don't want to go back over your courses that you've already taken in your grades because they have UCAS. They'll already have that. When you are adding content to your personal statement, if you're going to talk about books, people always say to do this, make sure you have really read them, because if you're going to go to an Oxford interview, someone may very well ask, and these are folks who will have read these books or know enough about them that if you've read the first 200 pages, you are going to be in trouble if you haven't finished the rest. But you want to put something in your personal statement that will show either your willingness to pursue this outside of school, to show that this just isn't an interest from your classes. So you're not going to be talking about all the sports you do unless they've given you an interest in sports medicine, and that's what you're going to be studying. Instead, here's a real life example of someone who used this and went straight on to Oxford interviews. He was going to study history and politics, and when diving into this with him, what we wanted to bring out was how he used this still informed his regular life and his interests. So he was a guitar player, and he actually loved folk songs and songs from the countryside, and could absolutely sit down and say, this was happening during this time, in a time of unrest, and you can hear in the music that it definitely reflects the society that was embracing it at the time, and he could really speak to this and was able to weave that into his personal statement. You want your personal statement in those 4,000 characters to seem cohesive, so you want to really speak to this theme. Anything extra that you're trying to fit in probably should be left out. Another smart thing to do is work with the person who is writing your reference. You can plan in advance. So if you have been smart enough to get into your personal statement early, or you don't have to submit it by the 15th, you can look at your personal statement and say, I wish I could emphasize this a little bit more, but I just don't have room to do it. My essay is in good shape and I don't want to change it now. And ask your professor, whoever is writing it for you, if they can't weave this into what they're submitting. Another thing to keep in mind is that you are really going to be focusing on keeping this 4,000 characters must sound like it's intentional. You don't want to sound as if it's crowded. You don't want to seem rushed. You need to be able to show them that you're able to make clear and clean decisions and that you're focused in your writing. You need that enthusiasm to come through, because they're going to need to know that you can make it through 3 years of intense study as well, particularly at Oxford at upper level. And lastly, a little bit about the format too. You are going to have so little space that you're going to have to sacrifice. You may read it and think this really should be a separate paragraph, etc. That's part of what they're trying to see. You need to show that you're a sophisticated writer, and that even with these limitations. And keep in mind that if you have something that you really should add into your personal statement and you're trying to fit it in, absolutely sacrifice your formatting a little bit. Whoever's reading it is going to know exactly what's going on. They would probably rather hear and see a nice flow through your essay, and if that meant that you maybe had one pretty large paragraph, that's okay. That happens to everyone. One of the places you should not lose characters is trying to add an impressive vocabulary. People feel that they need to use their expensive words, and you really don't. You want to have a sophisticated, strong grasp of language, but a clear communication of your ideas and understanding of what makes you a strong student and what makes you right for this course is far more important than having this very strong vocabulary. And lastly, I would say something that trips up students is that you're going to be probably, or you may well be, applying to more than one course. So if you're applying to 5 schools, 5 universities in UCAS, maybe say you're applying to history and politics at Oxford and to international relations at St. Andrews and maybe PPE at UCL or another school, maybe LSE, you're going to wonder a little bit, how am I going to make sure that I speak strongly to each of these, but they're all a little bit different. And the trick here is to find the core in all of them that you love, whether that's history, comparative politics, being able to weave backwards, forwards into the future to predict things, whatever it is about these that draws you. Just because it's a common thread doesn't make it any less true that it applies to all of them. And that's where your comfort in the essay should be. You know, you're absolutely not going to do something like say, oh, I've always wanted to study international relations, too specifically because you're shooting yourself in the foot for the history and politics or PPE. You really want to be able to pick out that commonality and show that this is where your interest is. So remember to make yourself interesting, really self-edit. If you have one thing that you'd really like to add and you just can't, it's like they always tell ladies, take off one piece of jewelry before you go out. Put it all on and take one off. This is going to be the one interesting thing about yourself that you hold back. If you couldn't fit it in, it's probably because it shouldn't be in. But if you get an interview at Oxford or Cambridge, then you could maybe pull it out there and it's still something of interest. Make sure you've read everything that you mention. Make sure that if you bring out the one interesting tidbit about yourself, that it's true. So in my example with the fellow with the guitar, this actually came up in his Oxford interview and he was asked about this and he knew it cold. He could absolutely speak to it. And it did show that in his personal life, he wove in his intellectual interests as well. So look for something like that. Don't feel too strongly that you have to replicate what your friends are writing as they're applying to Ivy League schools. This is not what you're going to do when you're writing your personal statement. So good luck. I hope this helps. And remember that if you are applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you still have some good steps left. You've got to take your tests. You've got to get through the interview process if hopefully you receive a call for one. And check back. I'll put in a couple of videos about those as well. Good luck.